Good afternoon, everybody. This is Randy Welsh, the Executive Director for the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. And bear with me as I allow more people to enter into the program area here. We'll get started in just a second, get the slideshow up and running, but thanks for joining us today for our presentation about NWSA's funding programs. Some exciting news to share, and looking forward to a good round of project proposals submitted by both wilderness stewardship and trail stewardship organizations this season. We're going to focus on our two main programs, the Wilderness Stewardship Performance and the Trail Partner Performance or Trail Partner Funding. I'll go over each of those programs in enough detail, and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions that people might have about our funding programs as we get near the end. So we get just a couple more people coming in, and we'll get started here in just a second. As soon as the slideshow will begin to work for me. There we go. Okay. I think this will start. So what I would like to do today is focus in a little bit on what's new in 2023, as well as provide enough information about our programs for anybody who's new to our funding program, so that they understand what's needed, necessary in order to be able to apply and be successful in getting a program award. So let's just dive in. So again, I'm Randy Welsh, for those of you joining. I'm the current Executive Director for the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. I've been serving in that role for the last 7 years, and I'm about ready to retire for the second time after my career with the Forest Service and now with NWSA. It's been an exciting 7 years, and you'll see why here in just a minute. But our funding programs have been one of the hallmarks of my time here at NWSA, and I'm really happy with the success that they've had in getting money out to the wilderness and trails community, so that you all could be doing great things on the national forests. So with that, I'm going to talk today specifically about our Wilderness Stewardship Performance funding and our National Forest Trail System Stewardship Partner Funding, what we call the Trail Partner Funding. We also, from time to time, have a boots on the ground grants, but I'm not going to spend time on those today. Just we don't have money for that right now. Hopefully we will again in the future. But for right now, we're going to spend time on the Wilderness Stewardship Performance Funding and the Trail Partner Funding. To focus first on the Wilderness Stewardship Performance Funding. Wilderness Stewardship Performance is a suite of activities that wilderness managers, wilderness stewards do to help a wilderness area be managed to a minimum stewardship level. These elements, these activities, there's a suite of 10 elements that have a whole series of activities associated with them. They are critical for doing the work of wilderness, and so it's a specialized subset of wilderness work that wilderness stewards all around the country are certainly capable of doing this work and doing these activities. We see a lot of success by stewardship groups in accomplishing these wilderness stewardship performance elements. Some key things to remember is that the there are 20 different elements, but only 10 have been selected for each wilderness area. And so you need to look at just the 10 that are selected for each wilderness area and choose some activities that fit within those elements that have been selected for the area. Since 2016, we've distributed over $1.8 million for WSP work. And this is the exciting point. In 2023, we anticipate having $1 million to be able to distribute for wilderness stewardship performance. The Forest Service has got some additional funding. They used to have an internal program that they managed from the Washington office. They no longer can do that. They're going to let us manage a fairly significant portion of those dollars. So we are looking at having over $1 million to be able to distribute starting in 2023. And we will see how that goes. These projects typically return about a 3-to-1 on the investment, both with the cash and the in-kind match. I think that's one of the reasons that the agency has been so willing to provide funding for partners, is that we do get a return on the investment. Will allow the federal dollars to be leveraged and be extended in multiple ways, both with cash and in kind. Now, some of the key changes in this program, if you're familiar with it in the past, we need to spend a little more attention on identifying those specific wilderness stewardship performance elements that'll be accomplished. Some of the reporting in years past has been a little sketchy. We're tightening that up. We'll have some information in your application form and in the reporting that will require more specific detail about which element, what activities. But the big thing is that we're extending our seasons of use. The amount of time that people will have for both of our programs actually to last over 2 field seasons. So with grants being administered or being awarded in May, groups will have about 18 months through the following December to complete. So that would be almost 2 full field seasons for a lot of people, and over a full year, 18 months for accomplishment of the work that's being programmed. We're hopeful that this will allow groups to be able to do some more in-depth planning, account for the vagaries of weather, fires, and other impacts that we've seen over the years, so that if something gets stopped or delayed, that there'll be time to pick it back up and move forward with it into the following season or a little later in the field period. Another exciting piece is that the cash and in-kind match requirements have been reduced to 20%. No longer is it a 1-to-1 match of one kind or another, but a simple minimum, suggested minimum of 20%. So that if you're asking for $10,000, that you're willing to put up at least $2,000 as some sort of a cash or in-kind match contribution. This is being done to help encourage partners and not to have an in-kind or cash match requirement be a stumbling block to any group from being able to participate. Most groups should be able to meet that 20% threshold just through in-kind contributions of normal volunteer work on any sort of project that they might propose. So we really hope that this will encourage groups to consider applying and put forth good project proposals. Now, of course, there still will be some rating points that can be applied for the quantity of the cash and in-kind matches that people produce. So they're not going away entirely. It's still something that you can contribute to and help make your project more attractive. But that threshold for starting a project, for submitting a project, is very much reduced down to just a minimum level of 20%. And that actually can even be negotiable. If you think you've got a good project, but don't think you're going to meet even that 20% threshold, please give me a call. We'll talk that through. and there's still a good possibility you'll be able to submit that proposal. Because we are looking at having $1 million available, we're also increasing the project size cap. These projects in the past had been kind of capped at around $15,000 to $20,000 because we didn't have that much money available. Now with over $1 million that we're looking to have available, we're increasing the size of the cap to $50,000 for the WSP program. That hopefully that will also increase the number of projects that would be proposed, and people can see the value, the merit of competing for more funding. The program is basically the same we've had in the past in terms of how you apply. The information is at wildernessalliance.org. It's a short form application. We're still working on getting the new online form up and running, but in the meantime, use the current application to start preparing your information, and the information from it will easily be cut and pasted into an online form when we're able to get it up and finalized. The requested information typically is your contact information, your organization information, what the project is all about, the WSP elements that'll be accomplished, what the scoring for those elements would be, your required Forest Service coordination, and the timeline and any budget details that are needed and necessary. These projects still require a letter of support from your local district ranger. That ensures that these projects have been coordinated and signed off on by the local ranger district. And that's an important element and criteria for these projects moving forward. So again, with WSP, in terms of how they're rated and how you qualify, they're screened to see that they are a WSP element that qualifies for that particular wilderness, that it's one of the 10 elements that has been selected for that particular wilderness area. We look to see the kind of cash and in-kind matches you're providing, the organization capability that you have through your narrative, the project feasibility as a description of what you're proposing and how it'll be done. Then the level of accomplishment is always a big one, dealing with the WSP elements. And then the number of people involved, both your volunteers and crews. And we want to be able to identify those to keep track of that metric going forward, so that we understand how many people have been impacted or involved because of this funding. And then as a normal piece of our final evaluation, we look at balancing the projects across the types of projects and the area of the regions of the Forest Service that are receiving the funding, so that we're not skewed just, everything in California or everything in Colorado, but that we're have some good balance across all the regions. And that's usually not been a problem. We've been very successful in being able to have projects in every region of the Forest Service. We'd still like to see more projects come out of Alaska, a few more out of the Pacific Northwest. But overall, I think we've had pretty good success in getting a good balance of project types and accomplishments. So the application period started beginning of the year. It'll run through April 15th. We again hopefully get our decisions made within a short time frame by May 1st. That'll allow you to begin your project work in May with agreements, and then those agreements will run through the end of December 24. So you'll have over 18 months to accomplish these projects. And the final projects are reported in January of 2024. All right, so how to be successful with these projects? Just want to give a little crash course. So with WSP projects, the scoring is important in terms of how many points you're proposing. It doesn't have to be a lot. Typically, 2 to 4 points per element is party standard. We've seen projects that'll propose up to 24 points that would be added to their WSP scores, but that usually means multiple wilderness areas doing something like a wilderness education plan that covers multiple areas. But anywhere from 2 to 4 points for 1 or 2 elements is a pretty standard package that we see. And just making sure that those elements that you're scoring are the elements that the wilderness area is being measured upon. I want to provide you guys that the Wilderness Stewardship Performance Guidebook is your source for better understanding what counts and what doesn't count for wilderness stewardship performance activities and for the scoring that you hear me talk about. You can review all of those WSP elements on wilderness.connect. You go to this long link, but really reality, you're going to wilderness.connect. You're clicking on practitioners, you're clicking on agency resources, you're clicking on Forest Service, and you'll see a list, and right at the top of that list is the Wilderness Stewardship Performance Guidebook. And it will provide all the information you need about the elements, about the work activities, and will help you select out the best way that you think your group can help the Forest Service accomplish these items. Just for an example, this is the list of 20 different WSP elements that the Forest Service is measuring in wilderness stewardship. And so in each of these elements, there's a list of activities. You'll note that many of these are optional or elective. Several of them are mandatory. And there are ways that stewardship groups can help achieve points in both the mandatory and the elective elements. But you have to make sure that that wilderness area has chosen that particular element as part of their counting elements for wilderness stewardship. So that's the conversation to have with your local district to make sure that you're proposing work that will actually count within their system. Now, within each of those elements, this one, for example, is the invasive species element. And I just pull that up here because it can help you see how the activities can be accomplished and the kind of points that you're looking at proposing. So it starts out with some informal surveys, doing some initial actions, get some more quantitative inventory that looks across the whole wilderness area, development of a plan, then actions towards meeting that plan, and then finally other actions that will help complete the plan and make sure that it's monitored for effectiveness. So each of the elements has a similar framework in terms of the items and activities that can be accomplished, and just need to look at that detail to see how you might plug your organization into the actual work that would be done to help improve the scoring. So make sure the elements count, and then look at how you can contribute cash and in kind. Even though the threshold is low, you'll still get credit for any other contributions. One thing here is make sure that any cash or in kind are only related to this project, not to your overall program or other activities that you're doing, but just apply it to what you're going to spend on the particular project that you're involved in. And then ensure that the WSP elements are clearly defined and the scoring associated with them can be both identified and validated. So I think if you do that, you have a real good success of achieving funding in this year's program. Again, go to wildernessalliance.org for the WSP grant information. There's a fact sheet, your application form, your budget form, and then final reports from previous years are there. You can look and see what other groups have been doing in order to accomplish these types of projects. So we will move now on to the National Forest System Trail Stewardship Partner Funding. And this has been our other big success story. In fact, we have now completed 6 years of this project, and we just completed a plan. This partner funding really is meant to support the goals of the National Trail Stewardship Act. The National Trail Stewardship Act had as its focus increasing trail maintenance on the national forest and increasing the number of volunteers that were involved in that trail maintenance. So program was designed to help accomplish that. And so the work that's done in this particular program must be proposed on a National Forest System trail. And that includes all types of trails, both motorized, non-motorized, wilderness and non-wilderness trails can qualify, as long as they're identified by the agency as part of the National Forest Trail System. Then the work that you do on them would qualify. Now, this program is run as a partnership with other national trails organizations. NWSA acts as the managing partner for this program, but we work in tandem with American Trails, the American Hiking Society, the Backcountry Horsemen of America, the International Mountain Bicyclist Association, the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, and the American Motorcyclist Association for the review and rating and selection of the projects. This ensures that we get a good broad cross-section of reviewers and have all the disciplines and all of the types of uses recognized and evaluated and rated as a group. And I think we've been very successful to spread the money across all those different types of uses, and the benefit to the trail system has been enormous. Just want to share that we just completed our report. Let's see if it will hit the screen. Nope, not going to hit the screen. Oh, there. I'm not going to do it. Sorry. But you can go to our website shortly and download a copy of that report. In it, you'll see that over the course of the last 7 years, 110 groups have received awards. That represents over 180 projects. We've distributed about $1.8 million. Every region of the Forest Service has been represented. Through the process of these grants, there's been over $5.9 million in cash contributions by trail groups, and $7.8 million in kind contributions. In total, this represents over a 7-to-1 contribution. For every federal dollar, over $7 of cash and in-kind contributions has been received back to the agency. The agency really likes this and really likes having that level of partner involvement. And over 20,000 volunteers and staff have been involved in these projects over the years. That represents over 330,000 hours of contributed labor. And we've seen over 9,000 miles of trail maintained as a result of these projects. So the Forest Service is pretty pleased with the results of this effort and is moving to continue it into the next 5 years. And and partially as a result of this project, you may have been involved with America's Trails Legacy Trail Project program. That was an offshoot of our program focused specifically on the legacy roads and trails funding that was available. And we're pleased and happy to help support them in getting that kicked off for that specific purpose. Again, this program is geared more towards overall trail maintenance across the whole National Forest Trail System. So any National Forest System trail will qualify. All right, so some key changes in 2023 that we're looking at. We're going to continue the emphasis on trail maintenance, but we will look at smaller site improvement type projects as well. They can be successful if they have a high benefit value or in an important area, might have key linkages or critical links in broader trail systems. There are both going to be small and large projects that will be identified. A portion of the funding, probably around 20%, will be set aside for small projects, and the other 80% will go to the larger type projects within those dollar ranges. And again, the field season for this program has been extended for 18 months as well. We really have understood the problems with the fire and the weather that we've been having of getting stuff accomplished within one field season. This hopefully will take some of that pressure off and allow people to get planning and implementation work done in a more graduated process. And our Trails Program Manager has taken the step of actually reducing the match requirement to 10%. And that is a suggested minimum. So we just strongly, again, remind people that there are points that are included for cash and in-kind match, but as a threshold for involvement, pretty much any project, as long as it's on the National Forest Trail System, will be acceptable, even if it has no cash or a very small in-kind match. 10% again is a suggested minimum. The project sizes on these projects are currently set at around $30,000 as a suggested upper limit. We will consider projects higher or lower, but right now about 30,000 is where we think the legitimate limit should be based on the available funding. If we're able to get more funding, and that's still always conditioned on the federal budget process, the availability of carryover dollars, and the leadership decisions that need to be made. But based on our conversations at Hike the Hill in Washington, D.C. over in mid-February, we currently are planning for a minimum of $250,000, and we're hopeful that there'll be some additional dollars added to that as well, which would allow us to, of course, have more projects that would be approved. So up to you guys to get those projects submitted, and then we will do our best to try to get you some money for them. Again, with the trail stewardship funding, you're going to get checked on whether the work is on a National Forest System trail. Look at the organization capacity, just the basic threshold for cash and in-kind match. We're going to look specifically at the level of accomplishments, the miles of trail that are maintained, that backlog that's eliminated. We're going to look at the number of people that are involved, both volunteers and staff. And then we're going to finally balance everything by the types of use and then areas of the Forest Service that are involved, so that we have a reasonable balance, not equal, but a reasonable, equitable balance based on the number of projects submitted, the types of projects, and the dollars that are requested across those regions. Some final recommendations before we close out and take questions is, follow the instructions in the application form, and don't modify the forms or the formats. They're all done a certain way for a certain reason, and please abide by that. Ensure that your work qualifies, whether it's WSP or Trail Partner, that it's on a National Forest System trail, or that it qualifies as a WSP work element. And make sure that you're doing that early and complete coordination with the Forest Service, so that they have time to fill out and send in a letter of support, and that you and they are in agreement on what work will be done and what will be accomplished. Again, some cash always does increase your competitiveness for these projects, but the threshold for applying is very low now. The work within the period has been extended, so that's less of an issue. Just ensure that what you're proposing can be done within the 18 months time period. It will be very unlikely to be able to extend these projects another season beyond what the the 18 months will allow, not only because of the timing, but the challenge cost share that we use has some set limits in it as well. And again, for both trails and WSP, those accomplishments matter. They help set the stage for what will be done and the ratings that each project will get. So again, for the Trail Partner Funding, there's a fact sheet, an application form, and a budget form. You can check out previous years' summaries and accomplishments, look at some of the other projects that have been successful and model your projects around those. You should be hopefully successful. These trail partner projects, there are usually a lot of requests, more requests than we can fulfill with the amount of funding that we have. So the better you can make your project, more competitive it can be with accomplishments and things that count, then the better off your project proposal is likely to be considered. Again, the deadline will be the 15th of April for these as well. I'll just follow the submission information on the application form. Again, 2 years to get, or 18 months to get the work done, and final project reports will be due January 15th, 2024. All right, so if you have any questions, excuse me, I have to excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID over the last week. I may still cough from time to time. So you can still contact me at randy@wildernessalliance.org for any questions that you might have about either of the funding programs, and then check out all the information on our website. So we'll stop here and start to respond to any questions that you might have. Oh, excuse me.
Hey, Randy, question.
So go ahead. If you have a question, just rate. There's a small enough number here. We can just go with raise your hand and I'll recognize you. And we'll just work our way through that. If you want to also put a question in the chat, we can do it that way as well. All right. So who started with the first question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can we get these charts on that site as well? The charts that you just briefed?
Yes, I will put the PowerPoint on the website after we're done with today's session.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Was that you, Charles?
No, that was Alan Netzer.
Okay. Gotcha, Alan. All right, Charles, you're up. And yeah, Fred, it was a typo. It would be January 15th of 2025. Charles, you're on mute.
Okay, did I get unmuted properly now?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So I'm actually sitting in for our new executive director at VWA, who couldn't attend. We've made several applications in the past that haven't been successful. One of the issues is that the trails in our district tend to be really, really bad. So it's very difficult to get a substantial number of miles of deferred maintenance worked off. And I wondered if the criteria have been changed from past years, where you would take into account the severity of the deferred maintenance needs. For instance, what the Forest Service has in the deferred maintenance costs, or if the criteria are still the same. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, and so answer that question, the answer there is yes. We're going to look at doing a little more balancing between the amount of trail maintenance versus the importance of improving that backlog elimination, that spot improvement that might be necessary. So whereas a smaller scale project might have hurt you in the past, we're hoping that we'll be able to give more consideration to those kind of projects this year. We'll look at all things associated with the project, and the more that you can show the critical nature of that work for opening up that trail system, the better that project will probably score out.
Thank you.
So Kim, and you're on mute, Kim.
Hey, this is a question in regards to WSP funding and applications. So as far as the scoring goes for each element, can you speak to the difference between raising the scores or just simply maintaining a score? We are ahead on a lot of things in national forests in Alabama. So what we are trying to do is just kind of to maintain, there's not necessarily a score, a raise in the score, but we are going to keep removing invasive species or, so does that count for anything in the application process?
Yes, it does. That's always a balancing that we have to look at by, increasing scores in a wilderness that hasn't had a high ranking for WSP in the past versus trying to maintain those scores. I think it is a balancing act. We have approved many projects that just maintain current scores at an existing level, and it's based on the kind of project work that was there. But it's also somewhat based on the availability of funding too. With the $1 million that we're looking at, I think we'll have more opportunity to have projects that maintain existing scores without adding any additional scoring to that WSP matrix. If it was a smaller amount of funding, we might have more of a priority in trying to find new areas that needed to have those WSP scores increased. But with the larger amount of money, I think both those projects that are going to increase scores as well as projects that maintain scores could be equally successful.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tara, and you're on mute right now, Tara.
Thanks, Randy. So I was wondering if there's been any indication or if you know if this level of funding for WSP is going to continue at $1 million, or is this kind of a one-time thing that it's going to be that much?
I think for right now, it is with federal funding, it's always hard to tell because you never know. The intent right now is that it will be for this first year, see how it goes. If we're successful with the implementation of it, then I think there's every likelihood that funding can be available for succeeding years as well.
Great.
And if any money that we're unable to allocate this particular season, we'll certainly carry over and we'll add to the following season's project proposal totals as well.
Thank you so much. And then I guess a little follow-up on that. If we're we're pretty much at capacity for this year, but obviously it looks like we could do some work in 2024 on the grant. Would that be, I don't know, would that count against us if we don't get started on the project this year? No,
it won't.
Okay.
That's part of the process of giving people that extra time period to do the planning and to be able to phase the project into their implementation schedule. I know that we've made it difficult at times and having to do everything that particular year. I think we're trying to grow and move into the scheduling that you guys are involved in and trying to have more of a phased approach to these projects so that they can be looked at over a 1 or 2 year time frame. So,
perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Dave Johnson.
Sorry. I'm curious what the current rate is for determining the dollar value of volunteer time as part of the in-kind match.
I think you can go, usually the best way to check that is just to go to Google and Google volunteer pay rate. and it usually will pop right up. It's somewhere right around, I want to say 2590, I believe. Somebody correct me if you've got a more accurate figure, but yeah, 2995 is I think the correct last one I saw for 2022. And so it'll pop right up once you just Google it.
Thank you. I wasn't aware there was that readily available.
Yeah, it's put out. It's a national number that's put out by the government.
Thank you.
Or a associated government agency. All right. Let's see. Still looking for some hands to come up. Otherwise, we'll check the chat here. Okay, additional funding opportunities for 2024 that are separate from the 2023 funding projects. Yes, Lori, that is an excellent question. And yes, even though we're going to a 2-year time frame, we don't anticipate stopping our project requests on an annual basis. Each of the annual basis will also have a 2-year time frame. So just as we're submitting projects right now for 2023 that will expire at the end of 24, next year we'll ask for projects for 24, 25, and those will be on a 2-year time frame. So we anticipate having funding for next year at the same levels that we see this year.
That's great. Thank you, Randy.
You bet. Sorry about that. Let's see. Taylor had a question. No. So if you apply for this year, will it affect next year? No. We typically have not had to. No, I'm so sorry, everybody. It just gets tickled and gets started. So we have not had an issue with limiting funding eligibility for groups based on receiving past funds. Projects are usually different enough, and there's enough differences in all the projects that we receive that we've never really limited anybody from having eligibility for a project on a year-to-year basis or between the Trail Partner Funding and the WSP funding. It's totally okay to apply for both, and one won't affect the other. So that is not a consideration that we really have been looking at. And now that we're going to a 2-year time frame, I don't anticipate that that's going to affect the funding availability either as well. We're looking for the best projects that will get the best, completion on the ground for the National Forest and for the volunteers that are participating. And we let those projects float to the top, and we've been pretty successful with picking that 60 to 60% of those projects each year that we're have been doing these funding programs. Okay. Richard has asked about trailhead kiosk and related signage under the Trail Partner grants. That is a good question as well. With the focus being primarily on trail maintenance, you would think that trail kiosks and signage might be not allowed, but it is allowed. But I think projects that are 100% kiosks or trail signage aren't going to be successful against trails projects that have a combination of trail mileage as well as kiosks and signage. It's still possible that you could put a project proposal request under one of the small categories projects that was just signage and or kiosks. There's still a chance that it could be funded that way. Always better to have a mix where you have both some mileage accomplished, maintained, as well as the contribution of the signage and the kiosks. Okay. Okay. Can WSP projects be in more than one wilderness area? Yes, of course. Yes, that's definitely allowable. Projects are not limited to just one particular wilderness area or one or one set of National Forest System trails. You can put a project together that covers multiple wilderness areas, both for WSP and for the trail partner activities. Either those are perfectly fine and normal. In fact, we typically will get WSP projects that are engaged in multiple wilderness areas doing similar things. Sometimes they're doing dissimilar things, but that's pretty typical that 2 or 3 wilderness areas are bundled together into a program of work for a Wilderness Stewardship Performance organization. Okay. Can travel time be used in tabulated volunteer hours? Yes, that is certainly something that can be added to the be calculated into the contributed time that the volunteer is participating in that particular activity. Okay, any other questions? We still got a little bit of time, so I'll stick around if anybody has questions. Charles, is that a new question or the same hand?
It indeed is a new question. I think I know the answer, but a colleague asked me to put this to you anyway. For trail partner funding, if we had a trail that had been abandoned but is in the process of being resurrected and made back into a system trail, I was telling them that I thought that would be ineligible because it's not currently a system trail. Is that a correct statement?
Well, I think that's going to depend on what's the intent. If the work that you're going to do is going to put it back onto the system, then it would qualify. And I think if the agency has that level of commitment, if the intent is to restore that to a system trail status, then it would qualify. Just to describe that in your narrative, and note that that's what the system is doing. I mean, that's what your project proposal is.
Okay, I'm happy to be wrong. I'll pass that along. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that's the question of intent. So if you're planning to bring it back and make it part of the trail system, we're not going to discourage that. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And if the agency supports that and they're going to take the steps to make that a system trail, once the work is accomplished, then who are we to stand in their way?
Thank you.
David, did you have a question?
Yes, I actually had one new question, and the last question gave me another one to ask as a follow-up. If you had a current system trail that was really a poor trail, an untenable trail that the one I'm thinking of cuts through a wetland and is just unavoidable that it has heavy impact, would the funding be available to reroute or frankly replace that with a trail that has developed, that's a social trail that people have developed in order to bypass this untenably wet trail and basically turn that social trail into a system trail?
Yeah, that is a viable option. Essentially, you're doing a relocation of a system trail, and once you're done, the reroute will become the new system trail, and the old one will be put to bed and no longer usable or part of the system. So that's totally a legitimate purpose and would qualify.
Great, thank you. The other question I had is simpler. Would construction of or maintenance of trailhead registration boxes would that fall under the Trails grant or the WSP grant, because it has impact on both?
So I think you would need to look at how that's going to be applied. So again, it would be under a trail partner grant. It would be the same as like a trailhead kiosk where you're providing the information, and it's just a piece of the information that you're providing there as a check-in. Again, not as a sole source project, but hopefully included as part of a broader scheme of doing trail maintenance in an area that includes that trailhead. And that's just one of the pieces that's going to be done as part of that work. For WSP, that potentially could be part of like solitude monitoring, where you're ensuring that there's a mechanism for recording the number of people that are using the area, having that registration box there, and then doing the other part, which would be having people on site doing the monitoring of the encounters that occurred in the area as part of the solitude monitoring protocol. So
it wouldn't
that's how I
so
look
much
at it.
be, we're doing solitude monitoring separately, but the Forest Service is implementing registration boxes at our trailheads, really as part of a VUM process. So it would fit more into their required management category, WSP category. And I was just curious whether we're still in the process of, we still have some trailheads that do not have registration boxes yet. And of course, we need to maintain the ones that are there. So I was just wondering whether that could fit under WSP as pursuant to their management point, WSP points.
I think it could. Again, as an individual, like standalone project, it's not sufficient to raise the bar of any points that I'm aware of right now. But in tandem with some of the other work that's part of the WSP program and some of the other element work that you could package it together with it and make it a part of a project.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Phil, I see your hand up. Oh, Phil, your audio is having issues.
Better?
Yeah.
Good. I think, thank you. On this.
No, it's still cutting out for me. I'm on a hard time.
Let's try that. Is that any better?
That's better, much better.
Problem with the headphones lately. So exciting changes. Thank you for your work on that. If it's a 2-year program this year, is the anticipation there'll be another cycle in 12 months that will also be 2 years?
Yes.
A 2-year wait. It's okay.
Yes.
Each cycle is anticipated to have a 18-month time frame.
That's correct. Yeah, we anticipate that we will be able to continue to offer these funding opportunities each year, and each time they'll have a 2-year time frame associated with them.
Thank you.
All right, a couple other chats have come in. Let me see if I can.
Ooh, Alan's got a good question.
Yeah, so Brian, for the 14ers proposal, it does make sense to kind of combine those 2 seasons into one grant. That will help boost those accomplishments. I think based on our direction from the Forest Service, that we can also consider the value of those spot treatments. I think if you continue to show what the value of the work that you're doing in terms of the number of people that are going to be accessing that trail, the critical nature of the trail, and the improvement work that's needed, that may not be as big of an issue. Having a smaller number of trail miles may not be as big of an issue as it might have been in the past. Success will depend on other factors, such as the overall number of projects that are proposed, and then less so on that particular factor. So please go ahead and submit those. Supporting information on the estimate, the cost of the project. So Alan, to your question, all we require is a budget spreadsheet, which breaks the project down into common cost categories. And we'll then take that from you and evaluate it based on our reviewers' knowledge as to the feasibility of that. We don't require any great depth. We know that you guys are the experts and aren't going to be proposing stuff that's not totally feasible. We'll just do a rubber check of it to make sure that we think it meets a common sense standard.
So this is Alan just following up. So
Mhm.
essentially you evaluate that based under feasibility.
Correct.
How feasible, okay, good, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. If tools need to be, so Richard, if tools need to be purchased to complete the WSP project to count towards the dollar match. There's a couple of ways of doing that. If you already have the tools, then those tools can be part of your in-kind contribution to the project proposal. If you're looking at purchasing some tools to be part of the project, then that can be, part of the cost and expense that you're asking money for as part of this project. Yes, and that will, and if you're purchasing those tools, not using our funding, but your own funding, yes, that counts towards the dollar match. And okay, Kim, I'm not sure what you were responding to there.
Oh,
But-
that was about the, when the gentleman was talking about the possible reroute.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, we're at near the top of the hour, everybody. I hope that you've gotten enough questions answered for me that you will go and look up the information on our website at wildernessalliance.org, and that you'll consider having your organization submit some project proposals. Again, there's not a limit to the number of project proposals per year per program. I would just say that based on the number of project proposals we get, to try to put only one into each funding program would probably be the most successful. Multiple project proposals within each individual program is always going to depend on the total number of project proposals that we get from other parts of the country, other areas, and just the successes of getting more than one is probably pretty slim just based on that criteria. But there's no difference. There's no problem with having both a WSP program and a trail partner program proposal in play. Those won't compete against each other in any way, shape, form, or fashion. All right. So
All
Fred,
right.
you got
Thank you.
one last question here. A trail in the Reha Wilderness take up to 5 years to complete. Pack, stock, support, and some personnel to organize a work weekend. Yes, their fee can be part of the grant for the second year of the major trail work. Yes, we allow for consideration of any of your contractor costs. And that contractor cost could be things like hiring an outside crew, hiring an outside trail professional to come in and do some work, either with a trail rig or a trail building machine, a backhoe excavator, that sort of thing. So those sort of situations are allowed for, even if you're like contracting with a AmeriCorps, a conservation crew, to come in and supplement your volunteers or supplement the work that your local organization is doing. Those kind of costs can be included as part of the contracting costs associated with the project. Totally
thank you.
allowable. Totally.
Yeah,
You bet. Okay.
yeah, thank you, Randy. You know, this one is such a massive job. The Forest Service is paying for a conservation crew, college age students, where we're supporting them, and then WRV is providing technical advice that we just have, and sawyers for cutting down large trees for bridges and things. So
You bet.
yeah. Thank you.
That's
Take care. Great
totally-
meeting.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. Well, guys, I'm gonna go ahead. I don't see any other questions, so I'm gonna just say, bid you all farewell and thank you so much for your participation in our funding programs in the past, and we look forward to having you participate this year as well. I'll be staying through the review and rating process of this year's programs, so I'll be involved in that. NWSA is hiring a new executive director. That person should be in place probably by the end of March, first part of April. So they'll get thrown right into the mix of reviewing these project proposals along with me, and I'll be able to walk them through the process and ensure that we get to a good quality result at the end. So I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing for Wilderness and for our trails program across the country. Thanks for your willingness to volunteer your time and participate in the organizations that you're involved in. If your organization is not yet a member of NWSA, I'd be remiss in saying, please consider joining us and making sure that you're able to participate with the WSP programs, and then also getting updated on information that affects both Wilderness and trails around the country. So thanks so much for your involvement. Thanks so much for just participating with you guys throughout the years. So everybody take care, and we'll just close this out.